Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and it's funny, for as much as I talk about Adventure Time on here, I surprisingly don't bring up Regular Show all that often. I mean, the two were basically sister shows back when they were airing, so I ended up watching Regular Show quite a bit. I never enjoyed it as much as Adventure Time, but the two were always in the same ballpark when I was younger. I loved the wacky characters, absurdist humor, and the novelty of seeing mundane scenarios turn completely surreal. However, there's one thing the show did that basically made me drop it entirely. It introduced a love triangle. I've never been a big fan of love triangles. I've always found them really frustrating to sit through. Even the ones that aren't that bad are still nowhere near my favorite aspect of the show. And at worst, they can ruin a show I once enjoyed. But before we can discuss Regular Show's love triangle itself, we need a bit of context. Margaret was Mordecai's first love interest, introduced in only the third episode of the show. Now, let's be real, Margaret in these earlier episodes is barely even a character. She basically just exists to be hot and for Mordecai to drool over. She does gain a bit more depth much later on in the show, but by that point it's sorta too little too late. Because for so much of the series, she's basically just a blank slate of a character. And I think the reason why it's so hard to be invested in her is that she was introduced as a love interest before being introduced as a character. It makes their whole relationship feel weirdly shallow, like what does Mordecai actually like about her aside from just being hot? And for this exact same reason, it's kinda hard to take the show seriously when Mordecai is super depressed about her. It feels kinda melodramatic. It also gets really repetitive seeing Mordecai act super awkward around her all the time. But once we get to season 4, the show starts pushing them more as a couple, and I'm sorry, they just have no chemistry. They're sorta just a generic boring straight couple, whoop-de-doo. It's not like I hate their relationship or anything, it's just not all that interesting because neither of them really change all that much through being in this relationship. They break up at the end of season 4, and again, I'm just not invested enough to care. I did like the episode following this, however, as it was actually a very realistic depiction of what it's like to move on from someone, and I liked seeing Mordecai finally let go of Margaret. I sure do hope the show sticks to that. But yeah, the show never really fleshed out Mordecai and Margaret's relationship to be anything interesting, and Margaret herself never really developed as a character until after the relationship was over, so the whole thing just feels very shallow. But hey, that's not the last of Mordecai's relationships. CJ is a character who wasn't introduced until the season 3 episode, Yes Dude Yes, in which Mordecai hangs out with her after thinking Margaret is getting married. I'ma be honest, I don't really like this episode at all. I find the whole misunderstanding here with Margaret and her cousin to be really dumb and contrived. As is Mordecai asking Margaret to the movie he just asked CJ to, while CJ just so happens to be right there in the room. Like, even for Mordecai standards, that's pretty stupid. And on top of all that, CJ has the exact same problem that Margaret had. She's introduced as a love interest before being introduced as a character. Now, in all fairness, CJ does have a bit more of a personality than Margaret. She is a person who's normally very chill and just likes to hang out, but is very quick to anger and can easily blow up at people. This is a perfectly fine personality type for a character to have, but the problem is she's not really fleshed out much beyond that. Aside from a one episode later on where it's revealed that she's good at mini-golf and has a strange relationship with her father, but neither of these aspects of her character have much of an impact on the series outside of this episode, so my point largely stands. Anyways, cut to a couple seasons later, and apparently these two are so stupid that they can't make out who the other is under these masks, so they end up kissing at a New Year's party. Uh-oh. So now Mordecai and CJ are really awkward around each other when they coincidentally have to play dodgeball against each other. But it's okay because they talk it out and now they're totally just friends. Yep, Nothing more than that. Just friends. Yeah, the fact that the show acts like the two are just friends when it's so obvious that they're gonna get together is just kind of pathetic. Like, come on guys, you aren't fooling anyone. And it's a shame too, because it would have maybe been nice to see Mordecai be friends with a woman he doesn't want to date. But nah, we only get that for like 2 episodes. So then we get to the episode I Like You High, which has to be one of the most frustrating episodes in the entire series for me. So Mordecai texts CJ saying he likes Yuji, a celebrity on the show they both watch. But it autocorrects to I Like You High. So now Mordecai is freaking out about it, even though like he can literally just tell her it was autocorrect and he meant to say Yuji. Like, no one in this episode acknowledges that he can just talk to her like a normal person. But if he did that, then there wouldn't be a conflict. Are you starting to notice a pattern here? The show is relying way too heavily on dumb, forced contrivances. Which would be totally fine if it was only used in comedy-focused episodes. But when used in the big season-long storylines, it makes it so I just can't take the character drama seriously. I'd also like to point out that this episode feels like such a retread of the butt dial episode from a couple seasons ago. And the episode acknowledging this doesn't really fit that issue. And speaking of which, it gets really tiring seeing Mordecai act super awkward about CJ, just like he did with Margaret. Gee, it's almost as if his character hasn't progressed in the slightest or something. He creates this really stupid plan to take a picture with Yuji, send it to CJ, and somehow that'll make her believe that the first text was a typo. But he ends up not going through with that plan and instead just asks CJ out on a date. So now Mordecai and CJ are officially dating, and much like with Margaret, they're just fine. I don't hate seeing them together, it's just that they're not all that interesting. Again, just like with Margaret, neither of them grow or change by being in this relationship. But hey, it's not like they're unwatchable or anything. Their relationship is perfectly tolerable. That is, until Margaret comes back. Okay, here's where things really start getting bad. The romance stuff was at least mostly tolerable up until this point, but the love triangle is just awful. We start with the episode Merry Christmas, Mordecai, in which, CJ and Margaret are both invited to Eileen's Christmas party. That means we get to watch Mordo be awkward again, yay! Seriously, this joke has gotten so stale and repetitive, I hate it. But once they get to the party, it all seems perfectly fine at first. But then CJ has to go to the bathroom, and Morbobo is left with Margaret. They talk things out, and again, things seem fine for a little bit. But then they kiss. Accidentally? Yeah, Mordecai says he didn't mean to do that as if it was a complete accident, but like, how do you kiss someone accidentally? It's just another example of this show having really forced and contrived character drama. Because of course CJ has to come back at that exact moment so she can see them kiss and run out of the room crying. It just feels so soap opera-y. The episode Sad Sats directly follows the events of Merry Christmas Mordecai, in which Mordecai tries to make things right with CJ. But every time they're about to make up, some wacky coincidence happens that makes CJ mad again. This is another problem I have with this arc. Obviously CJ is totally in the right for being upset with Mordecai kissing Margaret, but by having her get this angry at every little coincidence, it kinda makes it seem like she's the one overreacting, even though, again, Mordecai is totally the one in the wrong here. Like, there's this really dumb scene where CJ is about to forgive Mordecai for no real reason whatsoever, but just so happens to drive by Mordecai and Margaret platonically hugging. Like, come on, tell me that isn't contrived. But after a bunch of wacky shenanigans, the two finally make up, and everything is good now, right? No. Because the next episode CJ's in involves her and Mordecai being awkward around Margaret again, my favorite. It's a shame too, because this could have been a really cute Rigby and Eileen episode, but was basically hijacked by the love triangle storyline. As well as this weird cult that uses turtles to keep their youth. I honestly don't know what to make of it, it's so weird. But whatever, CJ and Margaret sorta make up in the end, and now things are good, right? I wish. In the episode The Thousandth Chopper Flight Party, Mordecai is invited to a party with Margaret again. And surprise, surprise, he's super awkward around her. Also, a bunch of forced nonsense happens to make it look like Mordecai's cheating on CJ. And CJ just so happens to see it out of context and gets super angry. I'm sorry if my criticisms are getting repetitive, but that's just because this show is getting repetitive. This whole episode just feels like it's repeating the same beats we've seen before in previous episodes, which makes it one of the most frustrating episodes of the series for me. The next episode in this arc, Not Great Double Date, is, like the title would imply, not great. It's a really boring and sitcom-y episode where Margaret pretends to have a boyfriend so she can go on a double date with Mordecai and CJ. And in another really soap opera-y ending, Margaret reveals that she still has feelings for Mordecai. Whoa. But with that, we finally get to the season finale and the end of this arc, Dumped at the Altar. It's Muscle Man's wedding, and Margaret and CJ are both invited, which makes things awkward for Mordecai. But okay, get this. Mordecai hijacks Muscle Man's wedding so he can publicly dump CJ, and is genuinely shocked when she doesn't take it well. It's laughably stupid. But yeah, Mordecai and CJ officially break up, thus putting an end to this arc. So now that we're done summarizing, what are my big problems with this arc? Well, I feel as though I've already made most of my points clear. However, I have one major issue that I've only briefly touched upon. But before that, I'm just gonna quickly go over my other problems. Problem 1, it relies way too heavy on plot contrivances and conveniences. If stuff like this happened once or twice, it wouldn't be that big a deal. Most stories need some sort of coincidence to happen in order to work. But this arc uses them so much to the point where it's hard to take the character drama seriously. I don't feel bad for any of the characters when it feels like they're intentionally going out of their way to make the stupidest decisions possible. Problem 2, CJ overreacts to everything, which gives off really mixed messages. Because by all means, CJ is allowed to be mad at Mordecai for cheating on her. It was a pretty scummy thing of him to do. But by having her overreact to all the stupid little misunderstandings, it makes it seem like he's the one in the wrong, and it kinda lets Mordecai off the hook for being a bad boyfriend. I get that CJ's temper is a core part of her character, but 1, regular show already has a character whose main gimmick is getting angry, and 2, if you want the audience to take their characters seriously, then you kinda have to tone down their more exaggerated personality traits. I mean, they were able to do that with Benson pretty effectively in episodes like Busted Cart, so I don't really understand why the same couldn't be done with CJ. Problem 3, the repetition. Repetition is its job. Its job. Repetition is its job. Almost all of the episodes in this arc involve Mordecai, Margaret, and CJ all being at the exact same place at the exact same time, and being awkward about it. They don't really do anything to shake this dynamic up aside from different settings for them to be awkward at, which makes it, again, really repetitive to watch. I was already getting tired of Mordecai being awkward around girls in the earlier seasons, but here it's just ramped up so much. Don't get me wrong, I get why he would be awkward around Margaret, but it just doesn't make for entertaining television. And unfortunately, this problem bleeds into my big problem with this arc. And problem number 4. It amounts to nothing. Nothing about Mordecai changes after having gone through this arc. The only thing that really changes is the fact that he no longer wants to date anyone, and that he's perfectly fine with being friends with Margaret. Both of these are perfectly fine, but the show never addresses Mordecai's actual issues outside of jokes. It would have been kinda cool to see the show address why Mordecai is so awkward around women, and to see him do some self-reflecting a little bit. But nah, he just ends up dating some bat lady we never meet. But what about CJ, you may be asking? Well, I hope you weren't a fan of her, because she gets almost nothing. After she and Mordecai break up, he pretty much just dips out of the show and is only seen again through quick non-speaking cameos. Gee, it's almost as if she only existed to be a second love interest for Mordecai, and once she stopped fulfilling that role, the writers stopped caring about her or something. Basically, this arc could have never happened, and the show would have just been better for it, honestly. So you might be thinking, wow, regular show sure is terrible at handling its romance, isn't it? Well, it's actually amazing just how well Rigby and Eileen's relationship was able to avoid the same pitfalls that Mordecai's relationships fell into. Like, how are these even in the same show? Eileen is introduced in season 2 of regular show, and while she does seem to have interest in Rigby, Rigby shows almost no interest in her whatsoever in her first appearance, meaning that she's never strictly defined by being Rigby's love interest. And heck, the two aren't officially confirmed to be dating until the end of season 6, meaning Eileen basically got 5 whole seasons to develop before becoming Rigby's girlfriend. And come on, it's basically impossible not to love Eileen. She's just so dorky and fun and adds so much to Mordecai and Rigby's dynamic. She's basically the only major female character on the show who feels like she has a personality outside of being a love interest, which is kinda sad to be honest. And there's no real conflict or drama between them either, at least not any that lasts for more than 1 episode. The two are allowed to just be in a normal, healthy relationship, which is honestly kinda refreshing to see. It's the same thing I love about Luz and Amity in the Owl House. And much like with Luz and Amity, but unlike Mordecai and his relationships, Rigby and Eileen actually grow as people and improve each other through being in a relationship. Eileen learns to let loose and have fun more and to not take everything so seriously, whereas Rigby actually goes back to high school to complete his education and finally feel like a worthy boyfriend for Eileen, which is honestly just so sweet and wholesome. Rigby and Eileen are just a perfect couple. I love them so much. You know, it's really funny in retrospect how the earlier seasons of regular show made Mordecai out to be the responsible one of the two. Because by the end of the show, it's basically the exact opposite. Kirby, out.